Vivian Jane, Commissioner.
Lou Asherah.
Pam Dent.
Linda Winkler.
Leslie Stambaugh.
Dwight Wilson.
Rick Ratliff.
David Baum.
And Graydon Crapel.
Okay. No public comment? So let's go right to the agenda. We only have an hour this meeting, and thank you for all being here. And I'm sorry that the severe weather warning meant that we didn't go on last week, but don't want to risk anybody's lives for this. But we only have an hour, and I want to make sure that we end up this day with a sense of direction about what is needed to give us what Hillard Hines has called truly collaborative policing and oversight, and give it a good start in Ann Arbor. And, you know, beginning of the year is a good time to begin. So what I want is some steps. I want us to know what we think should happen, what needs to be involved before it gets started, who needs to be involved, and what the Human Rights Commission's role should be in all this. And it seems like the best way to start is where we left off on November 16th. So I'm thinking at that joint meeting between City Council, Human Rights Commission, and Hillard Hines' report and all the community responses, is there somebody who wants to give a sort of a summary of what went well and what went less well? Gives us context. Let's start with what went well. What are some things that went well?
You're talking about at the meeting?
At the meeting, and with the report. I mean, you know, a report was presented at that meeting. Hi, Corinne.
I don't know that I'm comfortable talking about it that way.
How would you prefer?
I'd rather just talk about it in terms of what we think our role is going forward.
Okay, you don't think we need to start with
A history?
well, even anything. That would be fine with me, but what do other people think? What do other people think? We need to start. Would you be satisfied if we said there was, well,
Are you asking for a summary of what occurred and what you believe?
not a whole summary, but what happened? We heard a report. Some things I think everybody agrees with, some things they didn't agree with. We heard city council questions, and we saw community response. And I think it's safe to say that community response indicated that it wasn't a totally positive.
But it wasn't, the community response wasn't reflective of the entire community.
No, of course not.
There was a very narrow section that came. I think I would agree with Linda. I think it's, what's going to be the role of the Human Rights Commission, how do we move forward? There's a commitment, from the city, I think from council, I think Jack would agree to be able to move forward with this, body of what it's going to be, so that there's some type of collaborative effort, however it becomes moving forward, that there is, that ability to have input, discussion of issues that arise within the community, and how do we help eliminate, communication disconnects and problems, and prevent things before they happen. Because in our discussions, even in our budget presentation, we're looking at that. Okay, what resources is going to take? How are we going to fund this? How are we going to do? The mayor has asked the city attorney, to come based on where we're at, current state law, statutes, labor agreements, what are limitations at this time in forming this, as we go forward, of what can and can't be done. And I think taking Hillard Hines and then adapting, I think the core that there is good, and then adapting that to what we need, or what we think, or at least what we can start with. Because no matter what, any type of commission like this, once we get it formed, and even moving forward, it will be a certain amount of time it takes to be able to get the pieces in place and to kind of get things up and moving and going forward. I think, and I found even after the meeting in November, there's other communities across the United States that are implementing similar type boards. They're not called CPP2Cs or whatever that's, but very similar context in what I think what some of the recommendations that were done, and how do you improve relations, how do you ensure that there's more of an active discussion between different parts of different parts of the community, and ensure issues are heard and then addressed. But there's a commitment from the city administrator and the council level that we're going to move forward on this. And as I said, the mayor had asked the city attorney, what are any limitations at this time that exist in initially forming the board that we need to be tied to, because long-term labor contracts and stuff aren't going to change. That's going to take, any changes, those types of things will take a long time. But what can we do to get started now, and how do we get it up and get it going?
Okay.
So by moving forward on this, like on the proposal that was outlined, something that's only forward-looking and has no sort of ability to review independent instance, is that what the city council and the mayor are looking at right now, or?
I can't speak, I think the idea is to have the perspective looking and then figure out what is, if we deal with specific instances, what can actually be done, or what are limitations. Because there are limitations on what can be done. I think the important thing is also figuring out a couple of discussions I had. One of the things we run into, or the board will run into, is they can be sharing of information, but what information, when it's shared with the board or certain members, still has to be considered confidential because of different things. But that looking at how would we go about doing that, and how can we do that. I know I've had a couple conversations with Chief Barrett, and in some ways he's looking forward is to figure out what can I tell you, what can I release, what can I, and then what's the mechanism to be able to do that, to be able to have those discussions. Because right now, there's no real process to be able to release, and what can, and how what's the best means to do that. But I think, to me, looking retrospectively is what I would think this group's role would be, is to be able to look at that, and then what happened, and how do we keep that? What policy things need to change, or what are the things we need to be able to influence to prevent things like that from happening in the future, or what are other mechanisms that we can use to help prevent that?
So the main thing is we've got to know what we want to see implemented. And I think we need to have that. I'm not sure, but the first step that the Hillard-Hines report suggests is appointing a chief and appointing the people, and then having them do it. And that doesn't seem quite. It seems jumping in too fast, because you haven't decided what you wanted yet. You see what Hillard-Hines says they wanted. What do we want? And therefore, what kind of chief do we need, and what kind of people do we need to man that committee?
You mean by chief, you mean chair of?
Chair.
Chair, because people might be
Yeah.
thinking police chief.
No,
right?
not
Yeah,
police,
exactly.
you're right.
Part of the discussion, is going to be because the role of the Human Rights Commission is going to change once that board gets formalized, and then what that relationship's going to be. I think that's going to be one of the challenges, because what that relationship, or how, because you don't want to be doing things in parallel.
Right.
How that works, because members from this commission are going to be members. There one or two members will be on that board. I would. Maybe. That's one of the recommendations.
Yeah,
I think
that's right, at least one.
And ensure that there's representation.
Right,
So,
but yes, we will be going back to being more
Well,
general human rights.
It may be a recommendation, but at no point did we say we were going to accept all of their recommendations.
No, of course not.
No,
Of course
that's what
not.
it was.
So, Graydon, you touched on one of the major concerns that I have. As long as I've been on the planet, it's felt like anything, that those who are in power feel that anything is allowed except what I disallow. Therefore, we're always playing in the blind. So we don't see the policies. We don't know what we are allowed to see. The chief has not made a suggestion as to what he is going to share with us. And what is feeding is a competitiveness that we don't need, because we should all be in this together so that we can build some type of community, some type of cooperation. But it doesn't feel like that there is a great deal of forthcomingness. What's that word? I despise transparency, because we know that we play with that word all the daggum time. So how do we move from point A to point B when there is so little transparency? I don't think that, I've hit this before, but I'm gonna hit it again. It doesn't feel like there's any sense of urgency from those who are in control. And from my perspective, there never has been one. Not from when we got led off the boat in chains by armed guards. Well, I don't see any sense of urgency. We're almost 3 years into this, and will we ever get there? I don't know.
Wait a minute, let me tell you where I think we are, because we are going to move, and one of the things I'm hoping is that we do what we need to do before we move, because now they want to move quickly. I think they want to start by appointing people and throwing them in a room and hoping that they will come up with a good plan.
When you say they, who is they?
I'm saying that the city administrator announced that they're going to have a plan in January, right?
I think that's what he
And-
said. Yeah.
And I talked to him also.
I'm not sure it was a plan, or by January, we'd have the input from the city attorney that would help inform any plan that came up in terms of what we, at this point in time, what can and can't be done with certain aspects of it.
Well, I heard a plan, and I also talked to him, and he and I are going to meet between Christmas and New Year's and talk more. But my concern is that the community and the Human Rights Commission be brought in first, and that we have a vision of what we want before anybody says we can't have it.
I unite with that.
Okay?
If he's talking about, if those in power are talking about moving in January, then we need to have community voices. And I'm not talking about the Human Rights Commission, I'm talking about the community. And there are so many different parts of the community that were not there, could not be there, because just think about it, if you're on probation, do you really want to be there? If you feel that you're being monitored all the time, do you really want to say how you truly feel? And so we've got those people who are silent, who others are talking with, I'm talking with, but we need to hear, you say that you're going to be meeting with them between now and
Other people
January.
we need more voices.
We need more voices.
Sure. So the
And
question
dare-
is,
And
what?
dare I say, my voice needs to be in there.
Absolutely.
Can we back up just a little? 'Cause
Okay.
I want clarification, and I think those who may view this may also want it. So based on the report that was presented on November 16th,
Mhm.
am I given to understand that city council and the administrator have accepted that report and now are moving forward with implementing what has been recommended?
No,
or-
We have received, there's a
Okay.
difference. We have received the report.
Okay.
Accepted meaning we are going to accept it and follow to the T, right? A lot of times it happens, a report comes in, you receive it, and then you take what is applicable, what is important, and there might be things missing in it, there might be things we might not be able to do it now, but that's kind of the starting point. So we
Okay.
received it is
Okay.
the right word.
Okay, that's fine. So now what we're doing as a commission is responding to that report in concert with city council and the city administrator as to how we will move forward with either implementing what has been recommended or, deciding that we can't, or it's on hold, or it has to be whatever. But my understanding, and this is why I'm asking for clarification, is prior to the report being presented, I asked the question of the city administrator, could we see the report before it was presented and make comments? And I'm being very specific about this because I know that we had the benefit of getting the report before it was published to the public. But at the actual presentation of that report, many comments were they didn't have sufficient time to review the report and develop strategies or responses, which I think speaks in part to who actually came to that meeting to respond. There was a criticism, and I think it was just, in that there wasn't sufficient time from the time the report was released until the time that they had an opportunity to respond to it, to really review the report. It was very lengthy, and there were those who wanted to be there who couldn't be for whatever reason. But I don't want to see us perpetuate that, where we are continuously being given information. And procedurally, my understanding was not that it has to happen separately, but my understanding is that City Council has to amend, well, maybe that's not the right word, take steps to create the oversight board, whatever it's called, so that it now becomes a part of
The
our
city government.
Yeah,
Correct.
what governs. So I don't know that that has to happen separately or simultaneously, but I'm trying to put in my mind procedurally what governs. And so that we have, this is gonna happen, and then this comes next, and then this is what will go forward, thereafter. So I'm still struggling with, okay, now that we've got this report, what are we doing next?
That's what we're here for.
Okay.
Exactly. What are we doing next? And it's before they create a board and sort of guess what it's about and who should be on it. We're the people who know exactly what we know. What we have had as much experience, as far as I can tell, as most people in this city, and we have an idea of what we think will work, and we want to know also, we want to ask specific questions from the community about what they think will work and what they think they need in order for it to solve the problems that they've had.
And may I say something? For me, it became very clear from the the work session that
Right.
we had,
And
and the comments, and especially the mother. I mean, that's a recent thing. So it's very well for the status quo to say, we want to be forward-looking, for me, honestly, it's code word. Forward-looking is code word setting up a body with no powers to independently review this. Take that mother, okay? Take that mother. The incident that happened at the bus stop. I'm not using any names. Is it okay for her to just take the complaint and say everything is fine, and Howard Lazarus says, I looked at the video too, everything is fine? I don't think that's going to build community trust in it. They want another set of independent, whether it's you or you, it doesn't matter, but an independent resident board looking at it. I think that's what we really need to be focusing, because that's what that came out with all the people who came and spoke.
Yes, I think one of the things we have to really get our hands or our arms around is whether we think it's appropriate that we have this sort of strategic planning body as opposed to somebody that reviews specific incidents. I mean, I think that's kind of a fundamental question, it seems to me, that we all have to grapple with. If we agree that the priority is strategic planning, is forward thinking, then we're on board with this. But if people feel that we're abdicating our responsibility by not having this group look at specific incidents and assess blame and accountability, we've got another issue.
So can I let me build on that, Rick. So I was not at the meeting. I did watch the entire recording of the meeting. And let me to start by responding to what you said. I don't even view the way you set it up as an either or.
Right.
Okay. I think that you can have a strategic planning group, if that's what you want to call it, a group that looks at improving police-community relations, whatever that means, right? I mean, I'm not going to try to define what that means now. But that also can look at specific incidents. And what I saw take place at the meeting, or at least the description that I saw by Hillard Hines, is that this body, as they're conceiving it, could do that. They could review it. Now, you're talking about having power, right? And having the ability of a body to review, come to a conclusion, and have some sort of, I assume, this is what you mean, tell me if I'm wrong, have some, be able to impose some sort of consequence. You're not saying that?
No, absolutely not. That
Okay.
I understand. But another set of eyes to look at the incident. So they
Okay.
can look at the tape, what happened.
Right.
And they say, you know what, we disagree. We don't think this kid should have been slammed to the floor.
Right, and everything.
Not disciplinary power. I just want to make sure,
Okay.
because that's another excuse people are using not to give any powers. Oh, but the police have their own contracts and we have no. No, this is not the hiring, firing, no disciplinary. But just to say what happened,
Right.
do we agree or
So
not?
what I heard when I watched that video is that this would be one of the things that the committee would be empowered to do. They would be given information about what happened, more than the sort of information evidently
That's
that you
not-
shared now. You disagree, it sounds like, but
Yeah.
they could get that they get information, and then they opine about the board comes to a conclusion about what happened, and then makes a report to whomever. I don't know whether it would be the city administrator, the chief of police, or both, with their feelings about it. Maybe even some recommendations about what they think should happen. That's appealing to me. What was not appealing to me, and Hillard Hines made this point, was to create a body that was a true investigatory body. The idea, setting aside the legal barriers, the idea that there would be 15 people who could be appropriately trained to do this sort of work on a voluntary basis. The police would immediately look at that as, this is a board that we're not necessarily going to want to work with if they're an investigatory body that is going to recommend sanctions that will actually, that may or may not be imposed. That seems to me, and what they said is that they've seen, what Hillard Hines, at least what I understood them to say is, they've seen that the communities that engage in that sort of a practice, that it becomes a little bit counterproductive. They get mired down in it. And it's not achieving what they want to achieve. You hate the word transparency, Dwight. I understand your skepticism of that word. I want to use a different word that seemed to me to be part of the main theme, and that is communication. The only way that you can really begin to build trust, in any community between two groups or multiple entities in a community is to provide a forum for them to begin to honestly and earnestly communicate. And I view the CPPC, as it's conceived here, as such a vehicle. Create a place where a group of community members that represent all walks of the community, I suppose whether or not the police should be part of it, I heard somebody suggest that they shouldn't. I actually think it would be a missed opportunity if the police did not have a presence on that board, could get together and talk earnestly, about what's going on and figure out how to make things better.
Let me ask you.
And that resonates with me.
Let me ask you some questions about that before you. Would it be okay with you if, first of all, if the board could ask, not investigatory, but could then, after the Internal Affairs looks at it, look at their report, could you ask more questions of the witnesses, of the police, of the,
I think that's one of the things that
Little
was
probing.
discussed, that, because it's kind of new grounds. And I think, Jack, did you bring up the subpoena, or I think you talked to Mr. Postman afterwards, bringing the information forward and allowing it to happen. There may have to be some, because of confidentiality, people in that group or, can't talk
Other-
about it
other
outside
communities
because of
do
confidentiality,
this,
but
though.
have the ability to review and look at by incident, or in the case if they feel, you look at data points, is there a series, is there data pointing to, there's a pattern someplace that we need to look at or, needs to be considered. I don't think that was out of the question at all. I think the one trouble, okay, how do we do this within the confines we have now and then make sure, because I think most council members agree is get this going, get it started, let's get something happening, and then we're gonna have to do periodic reviews, whether it's yearly or whatever, to see what needs to change, what adjustments need to change and how can we do it, how, to make sure this is guiding, going the direction we need it to go. But I don't think, looking at incidents is a problem. I think it becomes down to, is it the whole board, is it a subsection of the board? How do we ensure confidentiality? Because as council goes into closed session, it's a closed session thing, and reviews are done, questions come out. I'm not
Yeah.
sure, but some of that has to be figured out to ensure that, proper,
Right.
especially if you're dealing with juveniles or anything, proper procedures are taking place to protect
Right.
them, but that as much as we can, as much as the information come out, we can. And I think the other would be, I think it provide an opportunity for members of the board to actually maybe go, potential to go and sit in and listen to some of the review hearings, or in some ways, learn and understand more about how that goes, how those procedures happen. Because I would agree with David, to try and train civilians to be, with the how to investigate, how to do that, it's very challenging. Chicago just set up, they once again revised their board. They have a staff of 100, it's over 140, 160 members. Their budget's projected to be just a little less than $20 million. Close to 100 of the people on that board are trained investigators with legal backgrounds to look into issues with community and police issues and things. And I don't think we're set up to do that. Chicago has
Yeah.
10,000 some police officers and things like that. But I think, again, looking retrospectively, I don't think it's out of the question. But I think with the intent of how do we fix things, how do we ensure this doesn't happen, and if there, and maybe recommendations that, maybe can you ask this question, or can other questions be asked, or.
So it doesn't have to be either or, all of
No.
that.
But
So we can find ways to bridge.
I did want to clarify that I don't think Hillard Hines saw any oversight as part of their plan. It was explicitly not part of their recommendation. They literally said at one point during the meeting, civilian oversight does not solve community issues or bring resolution to issues. And that's a direct quote from what they said. They didn't think that oversight was part of this, and in talking about oversight and the investigatory process, I think, yes, they said that, they said quite clearly they didn't think that the CPPC would have an investigatory function, and that internal affairs would conduct all investigation, but that all the CPPC would be doing after that is disseminating information to the public. Like, they would be the face of whatever recommendations were made. They wouldn't have any input at all. And to the extent that they had any review function, it would just be to craft strategies going forward, not to actually comment on any individual actions, which is very different from the sort of oversight that even you're talking about. They explicitly did not want oversight to be part of the recommendation.
Yeah,
I didn't hear that. I think you're right that was definitely their emphasis, but I think when pushed, they said you can certainly incorporate, you watched them more recently, you can certainly incorporate oversight within
You
this
can,
body.
but they were not,
But we
they
don't-
did
but
not
we-
recommend that.
But it doesn't
Yeah,
matter,
but
we can
I'm just-
decide what we want.
I understand
Well, they weren't
that.
not recommending it.
But
They
no,
just weren't pushing it, I think, I got the sense, unless you think that they were just responding to being pushed at the meeting.
Yes. I got the
Hmm.
sense that they didn't want any oversight function at all.
Okay,
Even
that wasn't my sense, but yeah, Okay.
Because I felt like even at one point I was pushing them on that, and they said, oh, but at the meeting, when the final selection was going on, when people were pushing for oversight, the guy, I forget his name, the guy said, oh, the other vendors are better than us at police oversight.
Yeah, I remember him explicitly saying that if you
And
wanted
then
any oversight,
the Kirby had told him, why did you say that? We would have almost
Like, we're not the
I think
ones
lost the
that-
I heard
contract.
him, I took him as meaning if you want only oversight, then you should have chosen somebody else. What they're proposing is, you know, you
I-
can do
I also
oversight, but
expl-
we think that you would be better served to do something in addition to that, at least,
No,
well, okay.
I asked explicitly multiple times if we could just do both, if both
I
weren't
heard them
possible.
say yes.
And I heard them say no.
Well, we
Okay.
can't, well, I know.
I think we need to watch the video again.
Not only
But it
that, I know
doesn't-
in the selection committee, when that did happen, we even talked about having a second, when we went in, what do you remember?
No, I do remember something about that, and then them saying you can bring in other contractors to help assist that process if it goes in that direction.
yeah.
So you're right, there was
I mean,
a point.
We really, and I think the city is, I think when we, certainly our report stressed oversight highly,
Right.
but a lot of these groups only do oversight, and we don't want,
No, we don't.
that,
don't
and
want
and I think
that.
that's what they were responding to.
That was my sense.
So
We
for
need
our
community
purposes,
voices.
and to move this along, because we agreed to only an hour, can we
Right.
delineate specifics of what we want to see going forward?
Yes.
And what are they?
Right, and I think even go forward right away. We don't need the whole plan, but we need to know, what are we gonna do in January before they start putting people's names on this committee? We want to
How are
do
they going to make that determination?
that, well, I'm afraid.
Well, I don't think they can be suggesting names yet, because there has to be an ordinance change to the city's charter, right? They have to, just like there's an Parks Advisory Committee, they have to have a police review board. So our ordinance have to say, to make it part of the government structure, city government structure.
But that's just to actually create the
The board, not
whatever
the planning
it
committee.
ends up being.
Yeah.
Can that happen? You may recall that I said this briefly earlier. Can that, do we have to wait on that before you move forward with it, or can
No.
it happen at the same
I
time?
don't think so. I
Okay.
think you can.
That's the legal necessity,
Okay.
so that'll be
And
second
we've known that-
reading,
yeah,
first
we've known
reading.
that all along.
I think they can be done concurrently, because I
Okay.
think what's, we'll get the recommendations from the city attorney at least, but I think.
But the language, just to create it, it doesn't have to be.
Two
No,
readings.
I think what you try to do is probably get the initial skeleton crew of who would be on the board, from human rights. Even
That has
maybe
to
try
be
to
in-
look at agreement, who would be a good chair to start out with, and a few, and then work with that group to come up with what's the initial charter. And through the charter, then create the ordinances or the language for what, the initial start point is for that group. I would say, my hope would be, probably the logical way to get things going is try and have the basics in place to start at the beginning of the new fiscal year, where, then you can actually, the money can be allocated and things like, that type of timing would work in terms of time to get things together, and then start the new fiscal year, which would be approximately, is 1 July. And then look, then you have resources to be able to form, pull other things together, and get the board up and going.
So Councilperson Eaton had a comment.
Yeah. So I want to point out that not every board and commission has to be formed through an ordinance. So when we formed our medical marijuana ordinance review committee, it was just done by resolution. So it really depends on what council intends the new committee to do, what action it would take. We could set up a Hillard-Hines co-policing committee without any ordinance at all. But I believe if we really wanted to give a commission the authority to do real oversight, to perform a full investigation, we would have to do it through ordinances. So it really depends on what council intends to do with this. If they're just gonna follow the recommendations they got from Hillard Hines, we can do that through a resolution. If they intend to do what you guys recommended to them, I believe we'd have to do it through ordinance.
Okay. Did that answer your?
No, so the city attorney has been asked to, just sort of like give guidelines to what could be possible. Like what, will that be like a presentation at a city council meeting? Is that going to be a report?
It's gonna be a report.
An actual report?
It'll be a public report.
Public
that gets
report.
provided. And the intent was to start establishing, provide, what is the framework and what are the there are legal limitations right now that exist. What are the limitations and boundaries, at least initially, informing this, so people have an understanding, so you can start that discussion.
Is there a hard deadline for that, or?
I think it's in January when you're looking at, and realistically, tomorrow, the holiday season and stuff like that. I think it was January.
January, that's
that
what,
Mayor Taylor
yeah.
asked.
Correct.
And I think Mr. Postman said he could have something.
Okay, is there going to be a presentation at a city council meeting too?
No,
Or
I think it'll be part of the materials, and that the information's out there, and it'll be put on the website.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's what the
It
mayor
says public,
specifically
yeah.
asked for, was something that is for public release, that it can be talked about.
Okay.
And then, so it will be there to be able to look at.
I think a public comment on at that point would make a lot of sense, especially since I just look at the Facebook page again, and because of the internet issues, our work session was on a Thursday, I think, the 16th, and the report wasn't made available, and no one was informed of the public work session until the 13th. So everyone only had 3 days of notice for a
Right,
massive 200-page document. I think another public comment section is necessary and important.
Public
especially
comment
with,
session.
Yeah, especially
Okay.
with more lead time than this.
Lead time.
Because
Okay.
3 days was insane.
Right.
Okay, if we had a public comment session, what would it look like? Is that,
I think it makes
Is that
sense to happen after the report, after the city attorney's report too, because
Okay.
that'll give us some structure and boundary for what this could possibly look like even.
But to Pam's point, just following up on that, since we have limited
Right.
time, especially because you're gonna be meeting with,
Right.
Mr. Lazarus, maybe we should kind of take a little poll and see where we all are on just the general, do we think that the CPPC thing with oversight as part of its important role is the way we wanna go, or do we not wanna do that now? I mean, just so that you are speaking for us, and for starters, to
Right,
make sure that they know
I do
where we
need to know.
are in response to the report.
but I have a feeling that people, if we say that, we have to say CPPC.
Or we can call it,
I hate that.
Co-produced policing committee, right,
Co-pro-
CPPC.
Well, we don't have to
In a
call
very
it that.
general sense, because my guess is we each have an idea of what that looks like, and it's
But
different.
to Vivian's point, if some people are seeing that as not including oversight, then we need to be very clear that it
Clear
does.
that.
Okay, but
Exactly.
whatever we're talking about, it does include some kind of oversight.
Well, and so I guess that's the
reasonable?
question. What does oversight mean? Does it mean oversight with teeth,
Well,
meaning,
that we can,
right? Or does it mean, at least
Right.
in part, the ability to review incidents
Exactly.
but
that
that's,
have happened?
I think that
will
depends on
have
the
to
city
be worked
attorney,
out,
yeah.
but yeah.
Okay.
I mean, unless we have time to discuss all that.
Yeah,
now.
right. Well, okay, so maybe we don't need to get bogged down in defining oversight.
But it is something that has to be discussed, and we don't want it to be left just to the police chief and Mr. Lazarus. We want to be part of that
Exactly,
conversation.
absolutely.
But I don't know, just as a general matter, I just wonder if we're on the same page about.
Yeah, and I think that how far oversight goes depends in large part on what the city attorney says we're legally able to do, right? I think that the idea of any oversight, any ability to review independent incidents, period, no matter how far that goes, is what we're talking about right now.
Right.
Is that right?
But, I'm sure Mr. Postema will do a good job, but we also have to remember that he's gonna be very risk averse, right? And so we may or may not, we'll look at
We'll
it,
see
but,
what- yeah.
and it may all be fine, and we can still do what we want within the parameters he sets. But we may also wanna look at it and challenge some of the things he says, but
And I think it's very important at the end of the city council meeting, we had a public commentary session, then one gentleman came and spoke and said, you keep saying that police contracts doesn't allow us to do this, do that, do that. Remember, you guys, you make the contract, so make sure that there are provisions if there's misbehavior or whatever. I mean, it's not like every police stop is going to be reviewed, right? I can think in the last 3 years, 2 incidents just really came up. The whole Blake's Transit Center and Aurora Rosser. It's not like every traffic stop is going to be reviewed, the video.
Right.
So that if we don't have that, I can assure you, if things like this come up, we have no teeth, it just becomes a useless
No,
body.
okay.
I mean,
Well,
really.
again, it's the definition of what teeth is. You're
Yeah.
not gonna, in current environment, I can pretty confidently say you're not gonna have the ability to dismiss police officers or
Right,
things
and
like that.
No, nobody is asking
I
for
think,
that, yeah.
For me,
You
it's
know, the
access
idea
to
of-
information.
Nobody is asking.
I think
Yeah.
the idea of having a review or a presentation of what was discussed or what, again, there's gonna have to be some limits because of confidentiality and agreements and those types of things, but to have, maybe it's a question and answer session. You get the material and then you're able to ask questions and how, based on, or, how the officer responded, how he saw the situation.
Right.
And then, to me, the value that comes out of that, some of the value I think would be to start, especially the ability to work with the public safety department is like, are there patterns going on anywhere that are happening for some reason that we need to break, or if we recognize them, how do we break them? How do we keep that from happening? How do we, if the incidents, again, what's being done, to change so this doesn't happen? Is it policy change? Is it something that it is? Maybe it becomes a union negotiation 4 years down the road with the contract that we approach or you start working on, to make the changes that need to be done.
Let me ask if, is this a good time coming up? Can we get just a show of hands about whether you are, how we feel about having a CPC of some sort that has definite oversight capability, whatever that, and that's needed to be negotiated?
Let's define it generally. I think what you mean is
Okay.
the ability to review, to have access to information concerning past incidents that have happened. Putting aside for a moment how much teeth or authority, but the ability to have access to that, to be able to review it, and perhaps at least make recommendations. Is that what you mean?
And all the complaints that come in, whether or not we're aware of those incidents,
And to
Every
see
complaint that comes
complaints.
in.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
See complaints.
So it's not just past,
Okay.
it's present and future.
Yes, and it might not even be
incidents.
past. I mean,
Right.
I think.
Current, it's not
Current,
past, meaning
yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
It's
current.
Current events.
Well, maybe past, it may be, okay.
At a minimum.
If that's, if that's it.
At a minimum, I am in favor of it, at a minimum.
Okay.
Yes, I would favor that too.
David?
I guess I just want to ask one question about what you mean by current complaints. Are you suggesting that people could come to the CPPC instead of, or alongside an investigation that's going on, or not?
Yes.
I think an active investigation, I would think it would become an avenue for, because I can appreciate people are not comfortable going to the police department to report, an
Absolutely.
avenue to provide.
Yeah.
Come to the CPCC, make your complaint, and the CPC can pass that along,
Or,
and perhaps
you know,
begin a
at the
process.
end
They
of
did,
Well,
yeah, I
that's
think
no
the Hill
different
Heights
than-
did specifically address this at the meeting, and they said that made sense to them, because
Yeah.
one of the things wrong with the current complaint system
You gotta
is
go
that they have to be
go to the
registered with the
police.
police,
Okay.
and
So
that the
to answer
CPPC
your
might be a
question,
friendlier
yes.
face.
Okay.
Yes.
And I just want to go on record, I take exception to that term, CPPC.
Me too.
Okay, let's,
Let's leave that, let's leave it.
Okay.
So
No
when
term.
I
If you
acknowledge
go,
that I'm
All
on
right.
record of being in agreement with it, it is with the caveat that I hate that term.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
think most-
So-
I think most people agree.
Right.
There are, like, Wichita, again, just started, they took a year to form a board, and they kicked it off the beginning of October and they set the perception that, it replaces the city attorney's or the city administrator's review process, but it's the citizens police review and board and something else, collaboration board or whatever, talks about many things in CPC, but to ensure that, because, that things are getting reported, and then there's another avenue for it, but also that there is the ability to outside or in conjunction with the police department, be able to actually look at incidents to figure out how, prevent them in the future, and if there's any lingering questions or issues with it. And when I read it, I spent a little bit of time researching and reading on it, and there's similar boards like that. They're not called the CPPC or
No,
whatever, but with the similar context of what you're doing, that many of the traditional boards that were set up that only looked retrospectively weren't meeting the needs or the aspirations of the community because they weren't taking corrective actions needed to ensure that problems didn't continue to handle. But
we're way over the time that you set aside.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Oh, well, it's
No,
not 6:30 yet, no.
So,
but
yeah.
you have other things on here.
Yeah.
Well, they're not gonna
And
happen.
while I'm talking, we're not getting there.
Wait, I derailed the vote, okay?
Yeah, I want to go
Right.
through and finish the vote.
I vote yes. I know this is a straw poll. but-
Vivian?
Yes.
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's unanimous?
Okay,
Okay.
so Leslie,
Yes.
one of the major complaints that people who did come had was that there was not enough emphasis on the community.
Right.
We need to be able to also review the policies, and we still haven't gotten them. We've been asking for that for like 3 years.
Okay. Well, we're not a group. We're not the, whatever this nameless group yet. But this group,
a
I think that, I think, in the end, whole conversations I had with Chief Barry, I think he's looking, because right now it's, we don't, that's the missing piece of the puzzle, is how do we work, what parts of the policies can be released, and some of the tactical things, as Mr. Lazarus said, you don't always want to release in public because it shows your hand in case, but there's a lot of them I think that, can't, or.
I can tell you that we had trouble getting the blank use of force forms from the city. The sheriff handed them over with no question. So I know it's not a state law that it can be
Yeah,
done.
some of it's just
And his were very detailed. I mean, it wasn't, so we've got to deal with that. But the next question is, how about Vivian's suggestion that we start off with public hearings?
I think that everybody has to be there. Mr. Lazarus has to be there, maybe the chief. I mean, it can't just be to us. I think we've done enough of that conduit thing. It's gotta be to them too.
Okay, but can we run it? Can we
would
call
be-
it and
It
run
would be
it?
better if the city, if we all called it, right?
Okay,
And-
all it
and
together.
wasn't- I mean, that people know that all the decisions are
Okay.
at the table. I mean, I think,
That's true.
not just us.
Okay,
So this is something you can suggest to Mr. Lazarus?
I can do that. Is that something that we all agree on, that we really, before they do take any big steps, they finish they
Public.
More
actually-
opportunity for
Public
public
input.
input.
Yes.
Yes.
With sufficient notification.
Right.
Okay.
Because this 3-day or whatever
Yeah.
limited time frame is going to result in the same response.
Now,
that we
can
had
I
before.
ask, I don't know about other people, but I think we don't profit that much from hearing more complaints about, we would profit more if we said, what do you want in the future?
Yeah.
Than what
What are you unhappy
you're unhappy about.
And we will get that.
We will get that?
We
You
will
think,
get
you think
that.
they're ready for that?
Yeah.
about? Yeah, like specific details
I'm
about
in-
what this group should.
We will get that because I know they're working on it,
Okay,
and I put that to them 3 weeks ago.
so they have a vision of what they want.
We need a vision.
Okay, and they're gonna tell us, that's
We'll
good.
get a vision.
So there are people who are already thinking about it, so we might as well give them a voice and hear what they're saying, especially if anybody's thinking about it. Anything else we can do now, early? Before, in other words, we wanna let them know what needs to be done before they just jump in and try to create something that city created.
From my own personal perspective, I would like to see as much of what we recommended in our initial report be inclusive in what Hillard Hines presented so that it mirrors more of what we recommended, because that was more of what we heard from the community and the sheer plethora of information that was generated. That's what our efforts, year-long efforts, revealed even to us, that this is what the community, self-included, says that we want. So as near as we can mirror that report, since we've paid for the Hillard Hines report, I think we're better served. And then just on a personal note, I had the privilege of working with what was and still is called in the city of Cleveland. This kind of board is called a community relations board. The difference is they're paid, but in every instance involving the police, they are there. And in many instances where there's a crowd or a group of individuals, they go in and diffuse that situation and have the parties or individuals literally sit down and come to a mutual agreement about what's going to happen going forward. That was my personal thought of what we were putting forth when we said, this is what we want our community to look like. And I believe our report reflects that. So that's what I would personally like to see occur.
Any comments about that?
That makes sense to me. But wouldn't we also want, I mean, as long as we're sort of putting forth this wish list, what we want Human Rights Commission representation on whatever this body is, right? And do we want that?
We did ask for one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just
But-
saying,
but
is that, you
yeah.
know, it seems to me we
And I
need
think
to-
that was in the
Yeah,
recommendations and
right,
everything.
that,
I think
okay.
because there, you know, if
Yeah.
you go with the full recommendations, I think there's like 17 or 18 members, you know, trying to represent the broad spectrum from the community,
Yeah.
someone from the wards, some, you know, representatives from the wards, from different groups within the city, you know, so there was equal representation there. There was representation on, so it wasn't just one way or the other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So-
And they're talking, their report talked as though they had constituency, and they don't really, because they're not elected, these 15 members, and they really have to do a lot of community outreach also, in order to know what the community keeps wanting of them.
That
So,
whole constituency myth is fascinating to me. It's like when Martin Luther King Jr. was alive, people thought there was a constituency that he had. Nobody ever voted for him or anybody else. I mean, who it represents me? Who represents you? You know?
well, we can't have, 120,000 people on this.
No, you can't. No, you can't. But you also can't pretend that you're doing something that you are not doing.
Yeah.
What else do you need from us, do you think?
What else do you think we need? Anything? I mean, it is a start.
Um,
We do have a meeting, by the way, on the 10th, and the city administrator said he would be here for that.
Will he be addressing the questions that we asked him in November?
I hope so.
Has he otherwise responded yet?
Now, he has actually looked, he sought an explanation from a city attorney, and he said he thinks he has it, but he was gonna look for it this afternoon, and he didn't send it to me, so I
Are
don't
these
know
the
yet.
questions regarding trespass?
Yes.
Was it read?
Yes.
And what
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
But still no
So
response.
so they're coming.
Okay.
I mean, I know he's done some work to get them, but I don't have them.
Can
Yeah.
you, in your meeting with him, ask him to be prepared to respond to that in our January meeting?
Yeah, or he'll give me something. He was gonna give me something, and I will send it to you as soon as I get it. And then you can talk to him about it. But what he's done is he sought an attorney's view of what the law is. So, I mean, he's not the expert.
Can't he also ask the police chief if the police officers are reading
I
trespass?
have a meeting
wouldn't
with
they
him on
know?
the 9th, the chief, and I can ask him too.
Yeah, because if police officers know what that means, shouldn't
Well,
the
that's
police
right,
chief?
and we may find that there's not a perfect agreement too, and that's, again, what this group is supposed to look for, things like that. But yes, don't worry, that's not dead yet, by any means. If we start putting together a public comment session that is driven not just by us, but also by, and we also, there's something else I was thinking. We start working on getting a good look, going back over our report and seeing what it is. Have they missed anything, or is this really representative of what we're asking for and which parts are? So that we can probably form some questions of the people who attend the public also session.
I think it might be a quicker route for the not city council, the Human Rights Commission to have a public hearing. Remember like the one we had at the council chambers, before the report was finished, we had a public hearing. That might be the easy route for you guys to call it, but then of course you invite the city administrator and city council members will be there if you invite them, and then, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think, I would think it needs to be called by the city, I think, because no matter what, you gotta get buy-in, and I think if you make it part of the city, I think it's a little bit, there's a little more oomph to it about what we're trying to hear and what's trying to be done. And we, it can help ensure, and I think that's something we can, I don't think is out of line or anything else, but I think it's something when you talk to Howard, or Mr. Lazarus, to say, they'd like to have a series, to review, to provide some additional input, at least what this is going on. If anything, it can become a series of public hearings and meetings, as the process goes on, to provide updates and current status of where, publicly where things are at, and allow questions to be asked as it's going.
We'll talk about it. I mean, there's trade-offs either way.
Yeah.
I think people are more comfortable coming to us, and I think we also are better at getting out the word.
Well,
So,
I mean, we're gonna use the same, we'll go through Lisa Wandrash, she'll do her thing, and.
You guys do your thing.
And we'll do, either way,
Yeah.
I mean, whoever does it, it'll
Okay.
be the same.
it's,
I would like to see a setting more like when Hillard Hines was there, where, the mayor, the city council, and Howard
we'd
Lazarus.
like to see everybody there.
So that people, when they were speaking, knew they were speaking to the people who were, and the chief should be there. We're speaking to everybody who's gonna be involved in creating this.
Okay. Well, let me talk to him about it. That's a possibility. I think that's a good point. See if we can get it. Do you think city council would be willing to do that?
I'm not the person to ask. But I would be more than willing.
But at
Anything
least
that you
if- at
hold,
least-
that you invite
Yeah.
the city administrator and the police chief to, I will attend.
Good,
So,
thank you.
And I would encourage colleagues to, but that's no guarantee.
I think still it would be better if Mr. Lazarus felt like if he called it.
Okay,
And we gathered
Okay.
as many people as we could.
Oh.
It just,
okay. I'll
it
just,
should come from him, he's in charge of the city.
yeah. Okay, it is probably time now. Yes, it's 6:30. Anything else you think we
We
are?
have a public comment that we're gonna do at the end.
Oh, okay.
Can I
At
make-
the end?
Well,
I'm just the first person to do real quick.
Cool.
My name is Ben Hansen. I was one of the people who spoke briefly at the
Okay.
workshop a month ago. I wanted to point out in relation to something I've heard this evening. I've heard a number of mentions of there was this model in this part of the country and models in different parts of the country. It was not the case, counter to the representation, it was not the case there was anything like a systematic review of these kinds of things as they happen in different places that were a part of that report. I mean, that's
Right.
just simply untrue. There were a few convenience examples that were not even examples of any kind of civilian review in one case, where there were very good examples right next door. It also happens that we have an excellent, as far as I understand from talking to people who've been involved with it, very functional committee of this type right here in the city of Ann Arbor, centered around the university rather than the city. This was dismissed very quickly in the report, again, evidently with little evidence that it had been looked at, anyone had been called or talked to in any way. But the body is called, we looked it up, you can find it immediately on the web, the Police Department Oversight Committee at the university.
Yes.
Really?
I spoke
yeah.
to one colleague at the university who had served on this and felt that it served a very useful purpose. I don't want to take all your time, you're trying to go ahead. In the meantime, I've also done more research on my own time, talked to a member of the Berkeley, California Police Department and asked his experiences of the Police Oversight Committee, the commission there, which has been in place forever and a day. Berkeley's my hometown, so it's a little bit easier for me to do this over my way back. But no, I won't take your time more than that. Again, I think if you look a little bit, you'll see lots of examples of many variations. I should mention that there were, what you've been discussing tonight has many things in common with what I heard to work well at the university. One piece that maybe deserves highlighting, because my colleague who had served on it told me this, he felt it was very important to have that it was sort of a part of the law in the background that this committee existed. Because otherwise, at moments when it became inconvenient for the university would have been happy to say, oh, well, maybe we don't need you guys around anymore. An ad hoc sort of thing that doesn't have an ordinance behind it would be quite a bit weaker than something where the citizens were empowered.
There's a law in Michigan that says if you've
Yeah,
got
by
a.
statute, the university, if they have a
Right.
police department, they have an oversight group.
Right,
But that's not true here, so yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Very helpful.
thanks, Ben.
So, what I would ask of you guys, and I've really appreciated all the work that this commission has done, and I support it, is that you identify a goal, what you want the council to do. And in particular, you should address certain things like, do you want this committee to address particular complaints or general policy? Do you want this committee to have responsibility over initial complaints or just simply review what the police review was? You know, because if all it is that months down the road, they get to open the same files that the police internal investigation produced, that has value, but it's not the same as an initial complaint going to the committee and them having original jurisdiction to interview people and whatnot. Do you want this committee to have subpoena power, or are they just going to review the records that are gathered and disclosed? So those are the kinds of goals that I want you to take a look at. I think the next steps that you need to do is I would really like you to draft a response to the Hillard Hines report. You know, what do you like? Where did they go off the rails? I think that you should ask for another hearing for the public to come in. There's going to be a lot of complainers, but there's also going to be a lot of people who are going to give you affirmative suggestions. And I think that that's, the one is worth living through so you get to the other. I mean, there were a lot of complaints in our joint session that we really needed to hear, because those are the people who are not going to be on the committee, who aren't going to have contact with people on the committee, but we as a community really need to listen to. At some point in time, you're going to have to draft an affirmative proposal as to what you want us to do. I set a goal. That's a general sort of thing, but at some point in time, it's going to have to be a little more particular as to what you want us to do, because certainly our staff is going to draft something, and it's going to look a lot more like the Hillard Hines report than your report, to my dissatisfaction. And then once you have an idea of what you want, we're going to have to start drumming up support from community groups. You know, like the Jim Toy Center has already told me that, you know, they're generally supportive of the idea of a civilian oversight body. You know, there are other groups, you know, the Democratic Party, just civil rights groups and community activists who will come to your support if you have a clear vision of what you want. And then finally, when it gets to that point, you guys are going to have to actually sit down and talk to individual council members, make sure that they understand what it is that you want and how you're willing to accommodate the concerns that are going to come up in the city attorney's letter. You know, they're going to focus a lot on confidentiality and on labor agreements. I'm a labor lawyer. That's not that big of a deal. You know, you guys aren't really asking for the world. You're asking simply for a neutral oversight committee. And so if you approach it in that manner, I think that you can actually get what we need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Comments about that?
Well, I wrote probably 2 years ago now, it feels like, maybe it was 2 years ago, what I wanted. And I gave that to this body, and then we reshaped it. And we all united on the new. I'm going to go back and I'm going to review what I wrote and see if anything, if I've changed anywhere. And one would hope that I have changed someplace. Because you cannot be an adult without changing. But you can do this ad infinitum, and that's the problem. I honest to God, I don't know how to help people understand it, that it is frustrating as I don't know what, that we don't feel that there's any urgency to this. And so every time you turn around and do another study, and am I overreacting? 3 years, it'll be in February that I've been working on this. Maybe I am overreacting. I'll review it again, and I'll review the Hillard Hines again and see. But it's like, excuse me, I'm sorry.
It's frustrating. I know it's a lot of work.
Sorry.
On the other hand, we're getting a lot of people talking about it. That's a plus. I mean, this is easy, not easy stuff.
Not at all.
Do we need a group to, or do we need some time to get together and do some of the things that Councilperson Jack suggested? Like look over the report, summarize what we like, what we don't like, look over our original report also and get back, compare notes about what we're not seeing that, that's been left out. And of course, set up this meeting. There's somehow, or get the city to do it, which would be nicer, certainly. I think what?
I wonder if you should, I think the points you make, Jack, are good. I wonder if when you speak to Mr. Lazarus, you'll have a better sense for timeline. I mean, writing any large document, it will just, to Dwight's point, slow it
Right.
down.
Don't wait,
further.
that's right.
And yet we also do want to make sure we have a voice. So, and putting things in writing is the clearest way to communicate.
Right,
If we
and I
can
think
make it-
bullet points, I mean, I don't think
Yeah,
we're
that's true.
talking
It
about
doesn't have to be a
big.
40-page report.
Right.
Yeah. And also one shorter way to maybe address this is we have your report that came out.
Right.
And then you have the Hillard
Right.
Hines.
Right.
Basically, if you agree, you're fine.
Yeah.
If I were writing this report, maybe it'll be a 6-page report or a 4-page report, basically where they
Yeah.
fall short in terms of your report, which
Right.
in effect came from the community.
Right.
Because that's where the gap is, right?
Right.
So that might not take.
It's actually more work to write a shorter report.
Yeah, but it does also help your thinking, clarify your thinking about it. And I
Clarify your
think
thinking, exactly.
we need to get our hands dirty, I think, and just looking at it and seeing what we really want and what we don't want. What we've said we want, does it really look like it's possible, et cetera. So I will get back to you.
I mean, I will just say as a starting point, it shouldn't be so hard to look at the section of the Hillard Hines report that focuses on the,
Right.
I'm going to call it the CPPC, because that's what it's being called right now at the moment. And, distill in bullet point form, what are the essential functions of that? Maybe as explained a little bit further at the working session. Look at our report, and I don't know whether you're talking about what you submitted before the report came out, Dwight, or what the committee, or what the commission's report was. But I'm thinking looking at the commission's report, do the same thing. Where are things in common? Where are things different? What do we think about what we want to recommend in light of those differences.
Right, and then listen to the public comment, using that as a starting point and build on it. like-
Yeah, and that also addresses Pam's desire to have as much of the work that this commission produced. And let me just be clear again, I was not on the commission at that time, and I am in awe that you produced it. But to have as much of what the commission produced be part of what we try to propose, or what we want to propose to the city council.
So do we need a committee to work on this?
Well, we could, or I could just send out an email and ask who
For
wants to do it.
comments?
Well,
Yeah.
I think to expedite it, if you wanted to have each of us respond back to you with what we want,
Then
and
compile it.
and have you take that into your meeting with Mr.
that would
Lazarus.
be,
Because that's an
Certain-
email,
yes,
and the weekend's coming up, so
Right.
Monday is the holiday, so.
I know. I know. Okay, well, that I'll certainly do. And probably a little bit more. But, because I want us to be thinking about this a lot.
Should you go alone or should you go with a couple of people? for the
I could go
meeting?
with a couple of
I
people
think
if you'd
that
like.
might be a
That
good
wasn't the way I set this meeting up.
Has the date been set yet for your?
Yes, it's 8:30 in the morning. And that's
This,
what.
this coming week?
Yes.
What day?
I know it's not Monday.
No, it's Thursday.
Thursday,
It's
that would
Thursday
be the 28th.
Okay,
8:30.
I would like to be there with you.
thank you.
Okay,
I can be there with you.
okay. I'll let you know. Anybody else?
I could come.
I think there are a max number of.
Yeah, Max.
This is actually not a small place we're meeting at.
I know, but won't we have too many HRC?
Yeah, one,
people?
two,
Oh,
three,
oh,
four
oh,
this
oh,
year.
that.
Yeah, 5 is for.
Quorum, but there's only 4 now, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, right?
You might want to just clear it with Mr.
I will
Lazarus,
do
too.
that too, but,
And
yes,
you'll let me know?
yes. So Dwight, Pam, and Vivian?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, then that'll be just under a quorum, good. Let me check that out. Okay, well, we are beyond the 6:30, and I know people want to get back. I thank you for this. This has been very helpful, and I think that we've got the beginnings of a plan that will make a big difference.
Thanks, Lincoln.
Thank you.
I move that we.
Oh, thank you.
Second. Should we vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Happy